trying to get in real fast. Yeah, that's how I see it. There's just hard work.
Welcome back to the end. Here we go. Congrats to all, and many thanks to Chella, Jean-Marie, Andrew, Kate, and Taylor for all they've put into making this week happen. I want to welcome Professor Robert Mock from Plymouth University, who, along with Andrew, forms the bookends of my committee. And to our guest reviewer today, Caroline Coble, TI advisor, and I highly recommend her workshops. And Caroline is the guest editor of the issue of Else, which will launch tomorrow evening. I think it's 6 p.m., so be there. Now begin. Yes. So I'm Robin Thomas, and this is the presentation I'm giving as I prepare to submit my RDC1 proposal for the MPhil PhD program. My presentation will cover the period from Berlin to New York, and I will speak about the paintings I've distributed throughout the space where you're seated, their studies and sketches. So as you look at them, I ask to consider them within the framework of the portion of my proposal that I'm presenting to you today. Hold on to them. I will collect them in the end. They're not for you to keep. So, my working title is Painting with Personas, a self-reflective methodology. In this artistic research project, I will examine the multifacetedness of identity through the objects and acts of painting. Today I will speak of the first part of this title, Painting with Personas, and introduce the second part, a self-reflective methodology, which I will more fully address this summer in Berlin. Like the title, let's start with painting. This watercolor I did soon after returning from Berlin to help me visualize my project and the methodology, methods, and strategies by which it is given form through my painting practice. Picture a mouth filled with an everlasting gobstopper candy, as envisioned by Roald Dahl in Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. As it dissolves upon the tongue, the hard layers of varying colors and flavors surrounding my potentially answer-filled center melt away. It's a little metaphoric, but here's a diagram. So, my project's outer surface and core is painting, seen in yellow and red. My methodology, methods, and strategies and tools create a filling, I see in green and yellow. So I'd like you to keep that diagram in mind. I'm going to be talking about the yellow and the red, the painting. This project has 3 aims. I'll go over the first 2 and then talk about some of the work before returning to introduce the third aim, which I will elaborate on in a bit. The first aim, to explore as part of my painting practice how the multifaceted nature of identity might be expressed through the object of painting, as well as the act of painting. So it is about what painting, that outer layer, can teach us about identity through the objects and acts of painting, my artistic practice, which is the core, the red circle in the center. The second aim addresses how I want to do this through painting. That means both the outer layer and the core. By enhancement of the function of paintings as metaphors of identity, through establishing a novel approach in my studio practice for the questioning and contextualization of identity through painting. This novel approach is contained within those green and purple layers. But what is the basis of the novel approach? Personas. Personas are the key tool in my painting practice-led methods. I will utilize these to make multiple viewpoints accessible to myself during acts of painting. I've chosen to use the word personas to describe this tool. The Latin origins of the singular persona refer to a theater mask, something to be put on and taken off. The plural form, personas, denotes the psychological aspect aspects contained in its meaning. Personas are more than just masks of characters. They are also projections and reception of identity and self. Personas, like painting, are the results of a creative act. They need to be developed by me, the artist. Their development forms the first research strategy of my project, which I call persona development. Persona development is the conceptualization of personas through writing and image making in a variety of media and forms. This may include short biographies, autobiographical texts, memoirs, poetry, prose, correspondence, and social media postings generated from the persona's own email and social media accounts, as well as two-dimensional images, which aid me, the artist, in the development of the persona's identity and presence. Currently, I have 3 personas I am developing and working with. The first of whom is Melusine van der Weiden. Melusine first appeared in my life about 18 months ago during the very early germination of this project. I spoke of her a bit in Berlin. She's about my age, a writer in much freer spirit of questionable origins. She comes and goes as she pleases, following her whims and chasing her desires. This is double portrait, self-Melusine van der Weiden. You might recognize it laying among the chairs. It's my first focused exploration of the persona's identities in the studio through painting, and it occurred in the series of small, quick studies, the double portraits of myself and each of the personas. I was working in a manner similar to the series of character collages, which I showed in my presentation last summer in Berlin. I created a series of mixed media collages by fusing images, text, and bits and pieces, scraps of paper, detritus of my studio practice. Pictured here is the original work of myself and Melusine. From this, I created scans which I printed on Arch's hot press watercolor paper, previously printed with images of my painting, Sonata, as well as the written text of my MFA research in self-portrayal. The next persona I introduced is Franz Ignatius Walsh. Franz is the most recently developed persona. And this is the collage. Through the collages and writing, I'm finding that Franz's role in my practice seems to be that of assistant, gatekeeper, defender, and sage. Franz is an artist who's taken the path of professional assistant. He's older, and physically he leaves a lasting impression, though it's often in opposition to who he really is. He might look threatening, but he is really a bit sentimental and definitely a romantic at his core. He wants to help people and he wants to make sense of humanity, something he has a hard time doing based on his own experiences. He spends a lot of time observing the other 2 personas as well as me. Like the other 2 personas, he tends to manifest himself to the outside world through emails. Petronym. Petronym is the second persona to emerge, doing so this past summer in Berlin, and many thanks to Lisa Osborne for speaking Petra's name for the first time. Petra is the persona I know the least about. She uses the fewest words, but I've learned this fall that she is a painter. Here's the collage, and Petra's biography is slowly emerging. However, unlike Melusine and Franz, who might go off and do other things, she's taken up residence in my studio for the time being. When she's not painting, and I've yet to actually see her doing this or the work that she must be producing, she spends her time on a shelf reading. She has a good relationship with Franz. Franz has a slightly contentious relationship, or it's love-hate really, with Melusine. And maybe because Franz and Melusine appear to be mirror images of each other. So really opposites are alike. But Petra and Melusine, their relationship at the moment seems to be more about Mel encouraging Petra to engage more fully with life, while Petra smiles silently and observes the life that Melusine leads. Because I knew so little about Petra, I wanted to learn more about her. I thought if she's the painter, the best way to do this was through making paintings or looking at the collages. So I dissected the double portrait using an approach similar to the one taken with the making of the collages, photographing, scanning, enlarging, and printing, working and reworking with the intent to move the images away from representation to generate a more formally abstract image of Petra and myself. I cut up some of the prints and began to create new compositions in a sketchbook, which I've temporarily removed the pages from. So some of the lighter weight paper is actually from a pretty inexpensive sketchbook. And here you see progression. So the upper left is a scan printed on watercolor paper, and then you see a print that's been painted over with acrylic, and then you see a cutout recomposed in a sketchbook, another scan and print, another print on watercolor paper that I've then watercolored over. So this exercise brought me to the beginnings, at least in thought, if not fully in the process, of my second research strategy. A quick aside is the strategies and methods I employ will have some overlap as they flow into each other. And at these stages, these exercises are more about finding ways to articulate in how I might approach this process in the studio. So active collaboration consists of the collaborative creation of objects and text by myself and a persona. All the works produced in active collaboration will be made by me, the artist, with more conceptual contributions by the persona. For this exercise, I began a piece, which I'm still working on, between myself with these contributions by Petra and him. And what these exactly are, I'm still deciphering as I work on the piece, entitled Good Witches of Between. But just as I've worked and reworked the collages into a series of originals, a mix of inkjet, print, monoprint, and painting, incorporating pieces of earlier discarded work. For Good Witches of the Between, I mined the back catalog in my studio and drew on that to use as a starting point for the creation of a new work. The work I'm using was once declared finished, but is now being given a new life. I believe this original work was selected by Petra, and the title is in reference to the original work. I'm going to quickly run through some images to show the process of its involvement as I've described and documented it on my website. So in 2005, I created a painting, seen here, front and back of it in the upper corner. I'm using paint pens, gel ink, and acrylic paint on the magazine page from an issue of Vogue, featuring a photo of the painter, Elizabeth Payton, and I then mounted it on an MDF. It's about 5 by 9 inches tall, so it's not very big. A year later, Vogue published a spread from Anne Leibovitz around the theme of The Wizard of Oz. Keira Knightley is cast as Dorothy, you see her in the bottom photo, and artists such as Francesco Clemente, John Curry, Kiki Smith, and Bryce Gardner, Jasper Johns, and a very memorable Jeff Koons as a creepy flying monkey are the various characters. So here in this photo we see Cara Walker as Glinda the Good Witch. So using this page from Vogue, I took markers and colored in the figure of Glinda, cut her out, and then through a process of scanning on my first flatbed scanner, the painting at the top and the figure, I created a collage, which I then had printed at about 45 by 60 centimeters, so 18 by 24 inches. So taking that print, and with Petra in mind, I began painting over the print in acrylic and oils. responding to what lay beneath and what was emerging through the process of layering the paint. Eventually, I cut the painted on print apart and attached it to the large piece of paper on the wall in my studio, which is in the bottom row. There was a step in between this process. See here, I took the pieces I had cut apart and laid them on my scanner and scanned them. These only exist digitally. Anytime I can print them out and work with them further. So the lower right corner shows the current state of this work as it hangs on my studio wall. About a week ago, I'm in the process of painting primarily in oils. On top of it, there are layers of acrylic in there as well. So there are two additional research strategies for my project. I'm not going to discuss these in depth now. Instead, I'll give you a quick glance in the direction these strategies are leading and move on to my third project aim. The first, identity fragmentation, is a strategy where I will assume the role of the active persona. This is a role as fabricator to the persona. The persona I refer to as the creating persona in this case, such as Petra, and that is where the ideas are coming from. I'm just making, as the active persona, creative persona, the same what needs to be made. Authentic simulacra is the final strategy and denotes the paradoxical nature of this project, which is both genuine and imitation simultaneously. The primary tool will be the traditional artistic practice of copying. The paintings copied will be those created in active collaboration and through identity fragmentation. So, the third project aim, to develop a reflexive artistic research methodology to systematically examine the multifacetedness of identity and expand the artist's ability to see as both subject and object in the artist-object-spectator relationship. For this, I'm going to give you a little bit of background information on the artist-object-spectator relationship, and then I've discussed this aim in greater detail in a little. So, artist-object-spectator relationship. In 1984, British philosopher Richard Wollheim gave a series of lectures at the National Gallery of Art in Washington, D.C. His premise was to discuss, as a philosopher, how materials of painting, which make it an object through manipulation by the artist, are converted first into the medium painting and then transformed, per the title of his lectures, into painting as an art. In the first two lectures, Wollheim presented a model of the relationship formed between artist, object, spectator, which is necessary for painting to be identified as an art, and not like other types of painting we encounter on a daily basis. This relationship begins when the artist standing before the easel sees the painting, object, and art as the spectator sees it. A visualization of this triangular relationship might look something like this. So the artist, the object, the spectator are all responding to each other, the arrows pointing in both directions. Now I'll go over three words that appear frequently in this project's development and how they relate to each other within the context I'm developing. In the relationship shown in the diagram, so you remember it, each node has a specific objective identity. For artist and spectator, this means they also have what is called self because of their subjective existence, the ability to exist in their first person. Out of this consideration arose the question, what happens to this subjective self when seen objectively as another? And how does this relate to identity? The seen as both subject and object, referenced in my third aim. Dictionary and thesaurus entries for self and identity reveal, when referring to a person's individuality, self to be a synonym for identity. Identity, per definition, remains the same in different situations, while self constantly changes in response to the culture in which it is momentarily found. Changeability implies multiple options are available to and contained within self. Therefore, if self is sometimes a synonym for identity, then that identity could somehow incorporate its changeability. Paradoxical to identity's supposed sameness. Analogous to a multifaceted object such as a gemstone, each option and identity synonymous with self forms a facet of the whole, is always present, and never changes. Looking at the gem, the spectator's natural shifting subjective gaze temporarily highlights or hides a particular facet. This identity, like a multifaceted object, remains at once constant yet changing through the engagement of the spectator. This constant yet changing identity is a multifaceted identity. So, again, here quickly are my 3 project aims. And now I'd like to introduce the following 3 research questions. First, how do personas applied within the framework of a complex self-reflective methodology and as a tool in my painting practice impact the form and content of paintings? 2, how might a visual artist accommodate the multiple perspectives of the artist-object-spectator relationship model within a painting practice? And 3, how can tools and methods atypical to my painting practice and stemming from non-objective making creative practices aid in the construction of a complex self-reflective methodology in which the consistency of identity is preserved? So thank you, and with these, my questions, I'll end the presentation and open the floor to yours.